Nell made it clear from the start, she's not having it. The moment she spoke those words, it was clear something inside her had finally reached its limit. The tension that had been building for months between her and Tisha came to a head, and what viewers saw was more than just another disagreement between cast members. It was frustration that had been bubbling under the surface for a long time. Nell felt disrespected, unheard, and misunderstood. When she said, "I'm not having it," it wasn't just a reaction to one moment, it was a statement about all the times she tried to stay calm, all the moments she bit her tongue, and all the little things that had piled up until she couldn't take it anymore. It all started after the dinner where the ladies were supposed to clear the air. Everyone had hoped that meal would help bring peace, but instead, it opened new wounds. Tisha came into the conversation with strong energy, and Nell noticed it right away. She didn't know where that boldness came from, but it felt unnecessary. Nell even joked about it, saying maybe Tisha borrowed some of that big D energy from Destiny. The room was tense but also awkward, because everyone could feel that Tisha wasn't just speaking from emotion, she was on edge. It was clear something deeper was behind her attitude, but Nell wasn't willing to let that energy go unchecked. She stood her ground, and when she said she wasn't having it, she meant it. Nell felt like Tisha always had something to say about her, always had a comment ready whenever her name came up. But when anyone said something about Tisha, suddenly it became a problem. Nell was tired of that double standard. She felt like Tisha wanted to play victim but also wanted to throw jabs. To Nell, that wasn't fair. She didn't understand why Tisha couldn't handle being called out the same way she called out others. And that's where their tension really grew. Nell was clear, she could take criticism, but she wasn't going to keep quiet while someone constantly nitpicked her, then acted innocent when confronted. What really hit a nerve for Nell was how Tisha brought up old issues. It wasn't new drama, it was things that started a year ago, back at Nell's birthday party. That's when Tisha began labeling Nell as feisty. And for Nell, that word didn't sit right. She felt it carried a tone, like Tisha was trying to paint her as aggressive or hard to deal with. Nell didn't see herself that way. She saw herself as assertive, direct, and passionate, but not feisty. When someone calls you feisty, it can sound playful, but it can also sound dismissive, like they're minimizing your emotions. So when Tisha used that label again, Nell couldn't let it slide. She asked, "Why would you say I'm feisty?" Tisha's response was simple, "Because you are." But for Nell, it wasn't about whether she was or wasn't. It was about respect, and Tisha's tone didn't feel respectful. The truth is, Nell had been holding things in for a long time. She had watched how Tisha interacted with others, and she had seen a pattern. Tisha could be kind and soft one moment, then defensive and confrontational the next. It depended on the setting and who she was around. Nell wasn't the only one who noticed. Others in the group had also seen that side of Tisha come out in group settings, especially when emotions were high. But for Nell, it was personal, because she had tried to build a genuine friendship with Tisha. She had defended her before, and she had given her grace when she didn't have to. So when Tisha turned that same sharp energy on her, it hurt. It wasn't just about words, it was about loyalty. The situation with the men only made things worse. There was a moment when Tisha got upset about things that were said regarding her husband, Marceau, and Maurice. Nell didn't understand why Tisha took it so personally when she had only made light-hearted or harmless comments. But when Tisha confronted her, it turned into a scene. Tisha began talking with her hands, stepping closer, and getting animated, and Nell wasn't here for that. She felt like Tisha had crossed a line. When someone starts getting in your face during a disagreement, it's no longer about conversation, it becomes about control. Nell felt disrespected, and she wasn't going to let anyone invade her space like that. She stood her ground and made it clear that she wouldn't tolerate that kind of behavior, no matter who it was coming from. For some people watching, Tisha's reaction looked like passion. For others, it looked like aggression. But Nell saw it as unnecessary drama. She believed that grown women could have a disagreement without turning it into a show. When Tisha stood up and started gesturing in her husband's face, Nell couldn't help but think about boundaries. There's a time and place for expressing yourself, but there's also a way to do it with class and control. Nell didn't feel like Tisha understood that line. That's why she said she wasn't having it. It wasn't about being rude, it was about protecting her peace and not letting things go too far. Even after that moment, Nell tried to reflect. She knew that sometimes emotions get the best of people, and she didn't want to hold on to anger. But she also couldn't ignore how things made her feel. She explained that Tisha's behavior wasn't an isolated thing. It had been happening repeatedly. Every time they were in a group setting, Tisha found a way to turn things into tension. But when they were one-on-one or away from the cameras, Tisha acted differently, more calm, more gentle. Nell found that confusing. It made her question what was real and what was for the show. Because if someone can treat you with kindness privately but challenge you publicly, you start to wonder what their true intentions are. That's where the conversation about boundaries came in. Nell made it clear that she needed space and limits. She compared it to dealing with adult children, grown people who act immature when things don't go their way. That comment might have sounded harsh to some, but to Nell, it was the truth. She was tired of grown women who didn't know how to communicate without turning it into chaos. She wanted peace, respect, and understanding. But she also knew she couldn't get that if people weren't willing to be honest about their behavior. And from what she'd seen, Tisha wasn't ready to own her part in the problem. At the same time, there were people in the group who tried to mediate. They didn't want to see Nell and Tisha fall out completely. They believed both women were strong and passionate, and that's why they clashed. They wanted to see them come together, especially for the sake of the Black Girl Magic group they had been trying to build. But Nell wasn't sure. Her trust had been shaken. She said she'd work with certain people, like Kimmy and Kiki, but when it came to Tisha, she needed time. She wasn't ready to jump back into a group dynamic where she didn't feel safe or respected. That honesty showed just how deeply this situation had affected her. She wasn't acting out of pettiness, she was protecting her peace. Others in the group tried to defend Tisha. They said that she's not always like that she only gets defensive in group settings because she feels attacked. But Nell didn't see it that way. She believed that what someone shows you is who they are. If Tisha could stay calm outside the group, then she could also choose to stay calm inside it. To Nell, that inconsistency wasn't about personality, it was about control. And that's what frustrated her the most. She wanted Tisha to be accountable, to recognize when her energy crossed a line. But it didn't seem like Tisha was ready to do that yet. The more they talked about it, the clearer it became that there was deep misunderstanding on both sides. Nell admitted that sometimes their communication styles just didn't match. She might say something with humor, while Tisha might take it as shade. Or Tisha might try to express herself passionately, and Nell might see it as aggression. Those differences created constant tension. But despite all of that, Nell still hoped for resolution. She didn't want to carry bitterness. She just wanted mutual respect. When Nell said she had to take a step back, she meant it. She wasn't walking away out of anger, she was creating space to think. She didn't want another argument. She wanted to process things and make sure that if she ever re-engaged with Tisha, it would be from a calm, clear place. But right now, her boundaries came first. She made it clear that respect wasn't optional. And if that meant distancing herself, then so be it. As the conversation continued, viewers could see both sides. On one hand, Tisha felt like she was being misunderstood. Constantly labeled for expressing herself. On the other, Nell felt like she was being unfairly targeted and called out for things she didn't do. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. But what's undeniable is that both women are strong personalities. When two people like that clash, the room can't hold the energy for long. Tisha has often been in the middle of group conflicts, and this was just another example of that pattern. She's someone who wants to defend herself and her family, and she doesn't always know how to do that without escalating things. Nell, on the other hand, is someone who values self-control and directness. So when someone challenges her in a way that feels chaotic, she shuts it down fast. That's why this disagreement became so intense. Both women were standing firm in what they believed was right. In a way, this conflict also showed something bigger, how hard it can be for women with strong opinions to coexist in one circle. Everyone wants to lead, everyone wants to be heard, and sometimes, that leads to unnecessary conflict. But beneath the surface, both Nell and Tisha probably want the same thing, understanding. They just don't know how to meet in the middle yet. And until that happens, there will always be friction. For Nell, the main takeaway was growth. She learned that not everyone will see things your way, and that's okay. What matters is how you respond. She realized that protecting her peace sometimes means stepping back instead of arguing. It means recognizing when someone's energy doesn't align with yours and choosing not to engage. That's maturity, and Nell showed that by the way she handled herself after the confrontation. At the same time, this situation also put a spotlight on how easily small issues can become big drama when emotions aren't managed. What started as a misunderstanding about tone and comments turned into a full-on disagreement that shook their group. It showed how fragile their relationships really are. And it also showed how important communication is. Without honesty and accountability, friendships fall apart. Nell and Tisha's situation was a reminder that respect isn't just about what you say, it's about how you say it, and how you make others feel in the process. In the end, Nell didn't close the door completely. She still left room for peace, but on her terms. She wanted to see growth, not just apologies. She wanted to see consistency, not just calmness when the cameras are off. She wanted to rebuild trust slowly, if it's possible. But right now, her focus is on setting boundaries and keeping her peace. Because after all the ups and downs, she's realized that protecting your energy isn't selfish, it's necessary. Tisha, on the other hand, has some reflecting to do. Maybe she doesn't realize how her tone and actions come across. Maybe she's just reacting from a place of hurt or frustration. But if she wants to keep meaningful friendships within the group, she'll have to take accountability. Being misunderstood can be painful, but so can being constantly defensive. Growth requires self-awareness, and this situation might be the wake-up call she needs. As the women move forward, fans are left wondering, will Nell and Tisha ever truly make peace? Or will their differences continue to divide them? Only time will tell. But one thing's for sure, Nell has made her stance clear. She's not having it. She's done with the back and forth, done with the disrespect, and done with pretending everything's fine when it's not. She's choosing peace over chaos, and that's something every woman watching can relate to, because at the end of the day, we all reach a point where we say, enough. We stop explaining ourselves to people who don't want to understand. We stop tolerating behavior that disturbs our peace. We stop letting others control our emotions. And that's exactly what Nell did. Her decision wasn't about pride, it was about self-respect. She stood up for herself in a moment when it would have been easier to stay silent. And that's what makes her strength so powerful. In a show filled with alliances, rivalries, and ongoing drama, Nell's voice stood out because it was honest. She didn't sugarcoat her feelings. She didn't play the victim. She simply said how she felt and why she was done. And that kind of realness is what viewers connect with most. Whether people agree with her or not, they can't deny her authenticity. As the season unfolds, everyone will be watching to see if Tisha and Nell can rebuild trust, or if their friendship has reached its breaking point. Either way, this moment will go down as one of the most telling exchanges in love and marriage, Huntsville history. It wasn't about throwing shade or stirring gossip, it was about boundaries, self-worth, and respect. And in that sense, it spoke to something much deeper than reality TV. It reflected real life, how friendships evolve, how emotions shift, and how women learn to protect their peace even when it hurts. And that's where Nell stands, strong, calm, and unmoved. She's made her point, and she's standing by it. I'm not having it, she said, and she meant every word.